Okay, hello YouTube. This is going to be my second video on the Alapin Sicilian, and in this video we're going to be covering the main line. So we're going to be going after e4, c5, we're going to have c3, we're going to be playing knight f6, e5, knight d5, and in this video we're going to be taking a look specifically at kind of the d4 line, but we're not going to be taking a look at d4 without bishop c4. We're just going to be taking a look at d4. So if you like content like this and you want to see more of it, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and please click on your notification icon. So the general rule here is that when they play d4, you pretty much immediately want to take it. And I mentioned this in my other video. You can actually get into a lot of trouble if you don't take it. Sometimes white will be able to push both c4 and d5, and that's something that you have to be cautious about. So when they play d4, you immediately want to capture it, and I'll just say that you can get to the main line from a number of different move orders, and pretty much every single move order preference kind of gets played here. Just to give you an idea, you can get to the main line by playing knight f3 first, and knight c6, and then d4. That's possible. You can also get to the main line with d4, and then different versions of playing c4 kind of at the right moment. So you can play d4, and then you can play bishop to c4 at a lot of different points. So it's actually kind of interesting. So like you could play knight f3, knight c6, and then some people have a preference to play bishop c4 here. And then after knight b6, it is possible for a retreat to bishop to b3, but it's also possible to go into the main line after bishop to b5. So like both of these things are possible. So the main line here is b5, and then we're going to play d6, and then we're going to have c takes d4, and like I said, you can get to this position from probably about 3 or 4 different move orders, but all the roads kind of lead here, and the only exception to that is when they choose to retreat the bishop to b3, and those lines are certainly of an independent nature. And we'll be covering that in its own video. We're going to be talking about the move bishop to b3 because I actually kind of have an interesting suggestion against both that move and also kind of a lesser played move, the move knight to c3. I kind of have an interesting opinion on what to play against those two particular moves. But this is kind of like the super main line. After bishop to b5, the main move here is just to capture in the middle of the board, and then after knight takes e5, we really have nothing better. We have to break our pin. We have to play the move bishop to d7. Now, for the most part, I don't think you should be afraid of playing something like this with the black pieces, because these positions have just been well known to equalize for basically forever. White has two options here. He can take everything on the c6 square, and after he does that, your position is supposed to be totally equal. So an example would be like bishop c6, knight c6, bc6, and these pawns are kind of supposed to offset each other. For the most part here, I actually, in my personal opinion, I prefer black. I just think black's position is easier to play. I think that it's real easy to just play pawn to g6, bishop g7, castles kingside, and put some pressure on that isolated d4 pawn. But the c6 weakness seems a lot less accessible. Also, in general, when you have less space, and this is just a good middle game tip, when you have less space, it's always good to have pieces off the board, and we've just exchanged 2 sets of minor pieces. So a good example of this would be Win versus Gelfand in 2015. This game ended in a draw, but Gelfand kind of played it exactly how I would have. After castles, he just played g6, bishop b3, bishop g7, queen c2, castles kingside. He doesn't care about the pawn on c6. He says go ahead and have it. And they just trade off the weaknesses. White takes the pawn on c6, black takes the pawn on d4, and now after a few more exchanges, you can see this position is just completely equal. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. It's just completely equal. White has a 2-on-1 majority over here. Black has a 4-on-3. It's neither side really has a whole lot to play for here. It's nothing to write home about for either side. I would say that, like in rook and pawn endgames, though, the central pass pawn is going to be a little bit stronger than the outside pass pawn. And a rook and pawn endgame does seem a little bit more likely in my mind than a knight and pawn endgame. even though a knight and pawn endgame isn't totally impossible if we somehow exchange off all the major pieces. A knight and pawn endgame, the outside passed pawn is going to be a little bit better, so white would be happier with the b and a pawns. But regardless, there's still little to play for here. I think if two strong players play this position, it's just you're going to have a lot of draws, and that's kind of what happened in this game between Wynn and Gelfand, played in Berlin in 2015. They played another, the game went to move 43, and they shook hands, and nothing terribly exciting happened. So the other way they can play this, and this is kind of what people are trying these days, is after bishop d7, instead of trading everything on c6, because those positions are dead, a lot of people are now going after this bishop pair. They're saying, well, I'll just take the bishop pair and then queen d7. Now, this used to be thought of as kind of silly because, black has a decent development lead here, and you're not going to be able to catch up anytime soon with the white pieces. So black is actually doing pretty good here. Black has 3 pieces out to white's 1, and white has the isolated pawn. So an example of where things could go here would be Mavsevzian versus Shirov in Sarajevo in 2003, which ended in a draw. That went knight c3 and then e6, and then castles. And of course, it's good to note just we can't take this on d4 because then just queen takes d4 because there is this pin here. So we can't capture the pawn right away, so we end up having to play e6, and then the main thing here is to just kind of develop as quickly as possible, and that's what Mavsevzian did against Shirov. Mavsevzian just immediately played bishop e7. It is also possible to play a little bit differently here. You could actually play rook to d8 and continue this way, like say after bishop e3, now you can play bishop e7. This was tried by Tivyakov versus Bu in Turkey in 2013, and Tivyakov actually was able to go on to win. He was able to just exact a little bit more pressure out of this position. That game continued rook c1, castles, knight a4, queen d5, and black is basically just trying to pressure this isolated queen pawn. Right now he's putting pressure on d4, he's also putting pressure on e2. It's making life kind of awkward. Again, we're not too worried about getting a weakness on c6. We don't care. And he just kept ratcheting up the pressure on the isolated d-pawn. Eventually, he captured that isolated d-pawn, and white captured the corresponding isolated c-pawn, but black has more activity in this position. Black's position is just a little bit better. We're hitting here. We're hitting here. We've got all kinds of good stuff going on here. So bishop takes d4, rook takes d4. White still has to find some way to defend everything. Black just ratchets up his activity. He protects his back rank. Now everything is developed. The rook comes back, and some more things get exchanged, but the pressure is still very much on everything here. So Tivyakov, Bu was able to keep up the pressure against Tivyakov, and he just kept pushing, and eventually something had to give, and material was lost. And this pawn is threatening to make a queen, the knight has to give way, and the game is basically over at this point. So that's one example of how things can go right. It's also another good example of just how this passed center pawn can be more valuable than the outside passed pawn, or even in this case, the outside passed pawns, plural. So that's something that black potentially has going for him to play for a win. But a lot of these games do just end in kind of unceremonious draws. So if we rewind and we take a look at that Mavsevzian versus Shirov game, that game just kind of ended in a very unceremonious draw. And this is a very typical way that white tries to play this. He will put immediate pressure on the g7 square, and then you have to kind of defend it. You play bishop f6. And it looks kind of scary. Like, a lot of players do like to play this way with white because it does look scary. Like, it looks like they're mating you or something, but there's nothing here. There's no real mate threat. Once you get your king out of the way, the bishop is going to have to move. So as soon as you play a move like king h8, their light squared bishop will have to move. The mate threat is gone. If they play knight e4, you simply play something like queen e7. You hold the bishop with your queen, and then when they play, knight captures bishop, you can capture back with the queen. There's just nothing here. So I mean, it's the position is basically what's a nice way to put them? Everything is basically just a fantasy. So like if, for example, knight f6, just to give you an idea, because this wasn't played in the game, we would play queen f6. And I know a lot of you are thinking it looks like there's something here. Like, isn't this a skewer? Well, but this is a pin. So, I mean, there's nothing here. There's nothing here for anybody to write home about. We can't win any material. So like in the game, he tried h4, which threatens knight f6. I mean, this seems reasonable. But then just rook d5, and we're right back on the same page. So bishop g5, knight d7, and all this is just a nothing burger. And black was able to clear everything, and yeah, all of the stuff got exchanged, and then everybody shook hands because we have this symmetrical type pawn structure where nobody's going to be able to do anything. There's perpetuals already on the board, just kind of sitting there. So again, just to review, this mega main line, just kind of starting with one of any number of these move orders, going into this mega main line here with bishop d7. This has just been known basically forever, just to yield basically nothing for white. These positions are completely equal, and they're basically just kind of dead. So that's why I think in the third video we're going to cover the two lines that maybe offer white a little bit more to try to play for some sort of slight advantage. That's one possibility is retreating this bishop, just playing something like bishop to b3. These positions can become very interesting, and we can get to this from multiple move orders as well, like bishop d3, d6, cd4, and we can get to this from the cd4 move order as well. And then there's also the possibility of, instead of bishop c4, like say after we play cd4, d6, the move knight c3 can actually be tried. So then this move, we have to be prepared for this as well. So those are the two variations that the next video is going to cover. I hope that this video was helpful. I hope you learned something new about chess, and I hope you learned how to play against the C3 Sicilian a little bit better with the black pieces. Thank you very much for watching.